Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjayari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjavihari Radha Madhava Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna So shall we text one? I'll read that, then we'll to text 2 and 3. We can read that together. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Vasudevaya. So read from text 1, chapter 17 of Canto 6. This chapter is entitled Mother Parvati Curses Chitraketu. Shri Shuka Uvacha. I'll do for this. Shri Uvacha Yatas Chantarhito Antas Tasyai Kritva Dishe Namaha Vidyadarash Chitraketus Chakara Gaganecharaha. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, after offering obeisance to the direction from which Ananta, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, had disappeared, Chitraketu began traveling in outer space, the head of the Vidyadharas. As in response to, now we're on to 2. Lakshanam Varsha Lakshana Salakshanam Varsha Lakshanam Salaksham Varsha Lakshanam Avyahati Balendriyaha Avyahata Balendriyaha Stuyamano Mahayogi Stuyamano Mahayogi Munibihi Munibihi Siddha Charanahai Munibihi Siddha Charanahai Salakshanam Varsha Salaksham Varsha Lakshanam Anyahata Balendriyaha Stuyamano Mahayogi Munibi Siddha Charanahai Kalachalendra Droneshu Nana Sankalpa Siddhishu Reme Vidyadhara Reme Vidyadhara Stribir Yapayan Harim Ishvaram. I'll start again. Salakshanam Varsha Salaksham Varsha Laksanam Avyahata Balendriyaha Stuyamano Mahayogi Munibi Siddha Charanahai Kulachalendra Dvanishu Nana Sankalpa Siddhishu Rime Vidyadhara Stribir Kapayan Harim Ishvaram Salaksham Sarva Slaksham Varsha Lakshanam Avyahata Balendriyaha Stuyamano Mahayogi Munibi Siddha Varanai Kula Chalendra Dronishu Nana Sankalpa Siddhishu Rime Vidyadara Srivir Rapayan Harim Ishvaram Salaksham Varsha Lakshanam Saha He Chitraketu Laksham 100,000 Varsha of years Lakshanam 100,000 Vyata without hindrance Bala Indriya whose strength and power of the senses Stuyamanaha being praised Mahayogi the great mystic yogi Munibihi by saintly persons Siddha Charanahai by the Siddhas and Charanas Kula Chalendriya Dronishu within the valleys of the great mountains known as Kula Chalandra. Is it up there? Or Samaru. Nana Sankalpa Siddhishu, where one becomes perfect in all kinds of mystic power. They may enjoy Vidyadhara Sribhi with the women of the Vidyadhara planet. Kapayan causing to praise Harim, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hari is The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari. Ishvaram, the controller. Translation. Being praised by great sages and saints and by the inhabitants of Siddhaloka and Charanaloka, Chitraketu, the most powerful mystic yogi, wandered about enjoying life for millions of years with bodily strength and senses free from deterioration. He traveled within the valleys of Sumeru mountain, which is the planet of perfection for various kinds of mystic power. In those valleys, he enjoyed life with the women of the Vidyadhara Loka by chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord Hari. In response, please. Being praised by great sages and saints and by the inhabitants of Siddhaloka and Charanaloka, Chitraketu, the most famous mystic yogi, what did I say? Wandered about enjoying life for millions of years with bodily strength and senses free from deterioration. He traveled within the valleys of Mount Sumeru, which is the place of the perfection for various kinds of mystic power. Wait a minute. In those valleys, he enjoyed life with the women of the Vidyadhara Loka by chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord Hari. Purport. It is to be understood that Maharaj Chitraketu, although surrounded by beautiful women from Vidyadhara Loka, did not forget to glorify the Lord by chanting the holy name of the Lord. It has been proven or proved in many places that one who is not contaminated by any material condition, who is a pure devotee engaged in chanting the glories of the Lord, should be understood to be perfect. Om Gantimirandasya Garanjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasachadi Sacharine. So, in the last chapter, Chitraketu was, really bewildered. He was a king, and, he had a son eventually by the grace of Anjira Muni, and that son promised to be the cause of both Harsha and Shoka. Therefore, he called the son Harsha Shoka. Means distress and happiness. And he was overjoyed that, he was getting a son, an heir to the throne. He thought, well, maybe there's some downside to it, but at least I have a son. So, but in due course of time, that's the nature of the material world, actually. People may even understand that this is not going to actually really produce good results, but because of being controlled by the modes of nature, and and the mind, which is also controlled by the modes of nature, and the intelligence, then we're bound to act. And therefore, he was satisfied. But then the result came that eventually the son was poisoned by the other queens out of envy, and then there was great distress. This is the nature of the material world. If we try to enjoy something, it will eventually give us distress. To the degree we try to enjoy, to that degree we'll suffer. So it's best not to get too much into it. Otherwise, we've experienced great diametrically opposite sensations. So a devotee tries to remain, passive or neutral to the happiness and distress of this world. It's going to come, it's going to go. Don't be too concerned. And so, then he prayed to. Then at that time, Chitraketu, Narada Muni and Jira Muni came back to see how things were going on. And he saw that, he was completely distraught. And so, after he lamented and expressed his feelings, they began to preach to him about the nature of the soul. And that they even brought the body back to life, brought the son back to life temporarily. Which father are you? I've had so many fathers. And then they preached, and he became, satisfied, became convinced by this. And then he took to devotional service really seriously. And, eventually Lord Shangashan appeared. This is an expansion of Baladev. And he preached to Krishnaketu. In a very short time, he became, a pure devotee just by chanting a certain mantra. And so this chapter starts where, after the Supreme Lord left, he started performing his devotional service. And, I don't know why they were all women on his aeroplane, but, that's the way it was. They were a female Sankirtan party for some reason. But it don't matter, does it? To a self-realized soul, he's not bothered. He doesn't see that. And he's not attracted. Why? Because he gets the mercy of the Lord. He gets the mercy of the Lord, that when Krishna sees that, we actually have given up the desire for that kind of enjoyment, he then said, okay, now you're protected. But while there's a little bit of desire there, he has to try and fulfill it. So we'll find that, we're attracted sometimes. So that means that there's some residual attraction there. But in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, second chapter, text 17, it says, I forgot what it says now. I forget the verse. It says, Srimvatam Svakata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana, Vidyansta Stohe Bhadrane Vidonati Saritatam. And this is talking about, the seriously inquisitive, but serious inquisitive soul. Then Krishna bestows, he very quickly, Krishna clears all the abhadrane, the unwanted desires in the heart. And he becomes steady in his devotional service. Well, he comes to the platform of happiness. And in Prabhupada explains that, even great sages and people who are fixed in yoga, they become attracted by this opposite sex. Even after, like one, what was it? Which Muni was it? One Muni, 60,000 years. Which one was that? I'm not sure who it was, actually. He meditated for 60,000 years. And he only lived for 100,000 years in Satya Yoga only. And then, he saw two fish copulate. Oh, it's Subhari Muni, wasn't it? And, it completely took away all his intelligence. So it's like that. Because he wasn't protected by the Lord. He was a mystic yogi. He wasn't a bhakti yogi. Mystic yogi is still he may not be connected to Krishna at that point. He's achieved perfection in his practice, but he's not perfect in his consciousness. He still has material desires. So that's what happens. But a bhakti yogi, is he perfect? So here it says he was perfect. But he was a mystic. It says he was a mystic yogi, right? He practiced mystic yoga. But it was mixed with, it was Yoga Mishra Bhakti, or Bhakti Mishra Yoga Mishra Bhakti. And so therefore, although he was, relatively free, we'll hear that not quite later on in the Bhagavatam. And it was the Lord's inconceivable desire that he become purified completely. So he arranged his pastime for Chitraketu, that he would be cursed. Later on in this verse, he'll be cursed. And then eventually he'll take birth as a demon, and he'll harass the devotees. And then, Indra will come and he'll kill him. And he'll have to preach to Indra, because Indra, he's not as Krishna conscious as Vitrasura. But anyway, that's to come. Here we're still with the preliminaries. So we were on about perfection, right? So, perfection for a devotee means that he has a perfect desire. He's not necessarily, he makes mistakes. Sometimes in the material world, perfection means you never make a mistake. And, we may actually carry that into the realms of devotional service, that we, a pure devotee never makes a mistake. But we know that that's not true, because Prabhupada would sometimes say, "What is that?" And then one of his disciples would remind him what the verse was. So, this is a good lesson to show that it shows that it's not the actual activity which is perfect. It's the actual the focus, or the mood of the devotee. And this is why, we have to be careful in the association of devotees. They might do so many wacky things sometimes, just like, it just happens. All of a sudden, there'll be a flash from the past. And, it's still there in the subconscious. It may come forward and they may get bewildered by it for a short time. But we shouldn't actually, what's that verse? Apichet sudaracharo. Bhajite mamananyabhak. Sadhu eva samantevyo. Samvak vyavisa hisa. Vyavaso hisa. So that's what happens, is that while we're in the material world, we can be affected. And but it's temporary, because the devotee has actually a higher goal. He gives up that activity very quickly. He soon realizes, wait a minute, what am I doing? And then he carries on with his devotional service. So Lord Krishna says that, he's a sadhu. And we should actually think like that and see like that. And he says, if we, the worst thing we can do is actually see just that deviation and magnify it, or even, criticize that person. But no. Perfection is not that we do everything perfect. It means our mood is perfect. Actually, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains about this in his commentary. He says, Lord Krishna says, no, he is actually sadhu. Even he said one may criticize, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that even if one runs off with his guru's wife. Hare Krishna. I couldn't think of anything worse you could actually do. He says, he's sadhu. Vishwanath Chakrabarti. Krishna says, he's sadhu. Because he's like, whoa, what's happened? He changes and goes forward again properly. Of course, if he just actually carries on with that, then that's something different. That means he's not a very high-class devotee. So Krishna is really emphasizing that, we give devotees it's not even the benefit of the doubt. The benefit of the doubt is when, tongue in cheek, but this means that no, he's sadhu. So that's the first thing. So he knows the sadhus, he wants to satisfy the Lord in all places, all times, and all circumstances. Does anybody ring a bell, that verse? It's the last seed verse. Etavaneva jignasam tattva jignasatmana amvyad vyatikarevadvyam yat sat sarvatra sarvada. The seed verse of the Bhagavatam. The last one's talking about, okay, then what is the duty of one who's actually realized the first three? He says he shouldn't waste time. He should just engage in trying to understand the Lord in whatever situation he's in any place, any time, both directly and indirectly. So directly means, chanting Hare Krishna, kirtan, worshipping the deity, offering prasadam, doing, sankirtan. What's indirectly? We see him through the material energy also. We see the Lord through the material energy. And we see what not to do. And in this way, this is also searching after the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we're experiencing that all the time. Is that right? It's not like we're all like, we're on the pure platform, there's no doubt. That's why we call a person who's following properly is actually called a pure devotee. Green and ripe mango, you've heard that example, yeah? Green mango, it's like, it's not very good. It's okay for chutney, right? But, there's a big difference between a green mango and a ripe mango. So that may be the difference between when we start and when we are completely purified. Mango is the king of all fruit. Both in that, we need to actually also be understanding the nature of this material world. And Srimad Bhagavatam, most of the first part of the Bhagavatam, what's it explaining about many, many times, over and over again? I've already read this, Then the few next canto, it's here again, It's creation. The creation of I know about the creation. I've heard it once. But, we just don't know how we're trapped in this creation. What's our status quo? That's one of the 10 subjects of the Bhagavatam, isn't it? Creation. What's creation called? First, there's two creations. There's primary and secondary. What's the primary? Primary creation, sarga, and then visarga, the secondary creation. So these are explained, and then the position, portionam, then sthanam. Sthanam first, the position of the living entity in this world, then portionam, the protection of the Lord when he takes the devotional service like that. So, anyway, I think we've said enough on that. I shall read the purport to the Bhagavad Gita, see what it says, right? be good to actually see on this Apichet Sudarachara. Even if he commits the most abominable action, if he is in... Why are we talking about this? Because Chitraketu, we'll hear in the next verse how he, he comes to Kailash and he sees all the sages. There's Brahma there, there's the Kumaras, there's, they're all there, all the great sages. And they're all sat around, and Lord Shiva, he's a great renunciant. And renunciants, they don't usually mix with women, do they? They're like, and his wife sat on his knee. And Chitraketu sees this, and he starts laughing. It's not out of mocking, he usually laugh at, look at this guy, He was laughing out of wonderment. He said, he's such an advanced soul, completely free from material contamination. And there's all these sages here. And his wife sat on his knee. It just looks, if we saw that, we'd become completely bewildered. And so Chitraketu was in that moment, he's not degrading Lord Shiva at all. He's just in wonder. But all the sages, they don't do that. That's the problem, that Chitraketu, he lost it a little bit. You know what I mean? And what happened is he started to say, just look at this, Lord Shiva, the greatest. He said, it's wonderful how, he's in this position. All the sages are here. He said, and he starts talking like that. And, because he's considered a pure devotee, not quite, but a pure devotee. And so, has anybody heard of Tarangaranjini? You have, haven't you? Tarangaranjini, what does it mean? It means riding the waves. These surfers, like enjoying, aren't they, riding on a big wave. He says, so when we get past the stage of, attachment to this world, or relatively, when we come to the stage of, what's that verse? Nishta. We're fixed in devotional service. We're not deviated by things. Then we start really enjoying life, and we ride the waves of that. Ooh. And the tendency is to come a little bit, cocky, a bit proud. And so this is what Chitraketu's state is in. And so we'll hear how Mother Parvati makes this point. And anyway, so that's what, in other words, he's judging somebody who's more elevated than himself. It's the same point we made in just a few minutes ago. And, therefore, it leads to a really difficult situation for him. And we'll talk about Apichet Sudarachara. Purport: the word Sudarachara used in this verse is very significant, and we should understand it properly. When a living entity is conditioned, he has two kinds of activities. One is conditional, and the other is constitutional. As for protecting the body or abiding by the rules of society and state, certainly there are different activities even for the devotees in connection with the conditional life. And such activities are called conditional. Anybody give any examples? Grihastha does so many things, doesn't he? Due to his condition, he's actually attached to some wealth, to opposite sex, to children. And that's his dharma. He has to live in that situation, but practice devotional service. But it's conditioned, right? Constitutional means he renders devotional service. Besides these, the living entity who is fully conscious of his spiritual nature and is engaged in Krishna consciousness or the devotional service of the Lord has activities which are called transcendental. Such activities are performed in its constitutional position, and they are technically called devotional service. Now, in the conditional state, sometimes devotional service and the conditional service in relation to the body will parallel one another. That's when it's okay, where they're actually linked. What they call it, it's dovetailed. That's the word. They're dovetailed. But then again, doesn't everybody know what a dovetail is? You do. It's a joint in woodwork. They make a joint, and like these mats, if you take the covering off, it's like that. You've seen them, they're interlocked. That's a dovetail. Okay, carry on. He knows that perfection in his activities depends on his progressive realization of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes, however, it may be seen that a person in Krishna consciousness commits some act which may be taken as abominable socially or politically, but such temporary fall down does not disqualify him. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that if a person falls down but is wholeheartedly engaged in the transcendental service of the Supreme Lord, the Lord, being situated within his heart, purifies him and excuses him from the abomination. The material contamination is so strong that even a yogi fully engaged in the service of the Lord, Chitraketu, sometimes becomes ensnared. But Krishna consciousness is so strong that such an occasional fall down is at once rectified. Therefore, the process of devotional service is always a success. No one should deride a devotee for some accidental fall down from the ideal path. For as explained in the next verse, such occasional fall downs will be stopped in due course as soon as the devotee is completely situated in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, we should carry on chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'll not read the rest. Or shall I read the rest? Not bothered. Okay. Regarding Chitraketu, it's sometimes the most unusual things happen in devotional service. Where a devotee who seemed to be, a little bit, loose, all of a sudden they leave the body in the most auspicious circumstance. There was one devotee, I don't think he even took initiation, actually. He never officially took initiation. But, he had an infirm body, he was getting on a bit, but it was very, very serious. And sometimes, he would have a smoke. I never saw that, but some devotees tell me that, but it was like really serious. And then one year he was in Mayapur, he was in the Goshala, and he just left his body in Mayapur. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, wow, you see, we don't know who devotees are. Really don't. But an experienced devotee can. He's a little bit introspective by his actions. You know what I mean? That he's not actually, if we look in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we'll start to see what the qualities of a devotee are. And these are sometimes covered by our external engagement in service. As a sannyasi, must be self-realized, not necessarily. As a grihastha, like this, we don't know. So I'm just making this point that it's good to actually give a wide berth when we're associating with devotees, and there's a devotee now coming to Karuna Bhavan. I haven't seen him for like, it must be nearly 35 years. And, you know, he was just like out there somewhere. I don't know, he weren't coming here, and he definitely weren't going anywhere else. So he was somewhere. And then after 35 years, I came in, whoa, is he? And he's dancing in kirtan. You know, he had something to learn. He had something to learn. You know, George Harrison, I don't know where he went, but they said when he left his body, I mean, he went to Prabhupada at one point, and he said, shall I shave up and move in the temple? And Prabhupada said, no. He says, you can do more preaching in your situation. And so Prabhupada preached to him how to write, you know, to write songs. He was a musician. He told him what mood to write them in, devotional songs. And he finished up being the biggest preacher in ISKCON. He made more devotees than anybody else. If you talk to Prabhupada disciples, they all listen to, you know, his records. And they sort of become attracted. I mean, I remember when I was, you know, in the earliest, it was the late 60s, I was just like probably 18, something like that, listening to My Sweet Lord, you know. I thought, what's he doing singing that? You know, it was rock and rolling about, you know, just 2 years before, but now he's singing a devotional song. And so that actually then, you know, nobody saw him for years. And he was getting in, you know, he was still in his music business. And then at some point in his life, he had a serious challenge. Somebody tried to take his life. And then from that point on, it became very serious. And they said when he left his body, you know, the whole room lit up. So it's good to have that perspective. Even when we meet materialists, a devotee should see this person's got a lot of good qualities, and they have, but they're using them in the wrong way. That's all. They're not using them in devotional service. Okay, we can stop there. Anybody got any questions or comments? We stopped 5 minutes early, so yeah.
When you ask that question, what is it? How can we combine the conditional and the constitutional? And you said dovetailing, and then no one knew what dovetailing was. So it's interesting that, because Prabhupada uses the word.
I don't know what they're learning at school nowadays. I really don't.
No, but Srila Prabhupada uses that word so much throughout his books.
It what?
Srila Prabhupada uses the word dovetailing so much.
Nobody knows what it means.
So it just shows that, you know, it's a reason why, you know, how culture changes. And even if we don't change Prabhupada's books, but we definitely need to find out whether people understand the analogies that are being used. Because if you don't understand what dovetailing means, you must wonder what's the tail of a bird's got to do with anything. Got to do with anything. And
get the natural history out. Look at this bird.
But because when you ask that question, what's the word for it? I was going to say harmonious. Harmonious, that, you know, it's when you have different vibrations, you can, if as long as they're harmonious, then you can put them together. Whereas if other vibrations are not, if the other vibrations, which by themselves may be quite harmonious, but if you put them together, they make a terrible noise, like disharmony. So, and just because disharmony is there, it doesn't mean that the individual constituents of that noise are unpleasant. It's just that the combination of them is the combination is unpleasant. So when we experience some like painful interaction with a devotee, it may be just because it's disharmonious. It doesn't mean that the individual devotees have got any bad qualities. It's just the particular combination of them is like clashes. and it can cause like pain.
Yeah.
Can, like,
unity invite diversity into. We have to learn to see the common goal, common good.
it's
But,
just like,
it's not always possible anyway, because Prabhupada would sometimes say if somebody didn't agree with a certain preaching situation, he said, well, what do you want to do? Well, do it. One devotee, Prabhupada was practicing the harmonium. I think he was recording these songs we hear now, And this devotee came up and he said, Prabhupada. Prabhupada was, he was startled. He said, I want to do this, on about where they recorded it. And then he said, Prabhupada, I really want to do it. He said, do it. Do it, He would actually fan any spark. It's not that, it's a good point, actually. And this movement will become more like that. It'll become more populated and more congregationalized, and not all the congregation will actually live near a temple necessarily. So, it'll... So, it's like devotional service is not stereotype, Prabhupada said, is it? The spiritual world's 3 times bigger than the material world. And there's a lot of variation in the material world. So, there's at least as much in the spiritual world. I remember, but the thing is, there's a story of the Avadut Brahman. He had 24 gurus. And, he was learning from nature, actually. And one guru was the housemaid servant. She was very poor, and she was, there was nobody in the house, and there was a knock at the door. And when she went to the door, there was 2 young men, and they'd come, for some, in the Vedic system, people could go to a house and get something to eat or something. You know what I mean? And so she invited them in, and she was thinking, I'll cook something for them, and give them some water. And so then she went back into the kitchen, and then as soon as she started cooking, her bracelets started clanging together. And she thought, oh, if they see I'm out of the room and I'm preparing, they'll think I'm poor, that I haven't got a maidservant. So, these might be a prospective husband for me. So they'll want to marry, a girl of higher class. And so she took her bangles off so that, when she was preparing, they wouldn't suspect that she was actually the one who was cooking. So then Prabhupada writes in his purport, it's not Prabhupada actually, it's the servants of Prabhupada, it's in the 11th canto. And he writes in his purport that, it's Prabhupada. So he writes in his purport that, whenever there's 2 people together, there'll be a noise. You know what I mean? Just like these ants. So it's unavoidable. But, he says, but devotees learn to tolerate for the common goal, that they're both serving Krishna. And in the spiritual world, it's the same. There's the left-wing gopis and the right-wing gopis. They don't agree. But they're both serving Krishna, so they tolerate. And it's the same with the acharyas. Their commentaries are not always the same. But Prabhupada doesn't take one acharya as being right and another. The one particular purport, and there were 3 acharyas wrote about it. Jiva Goswami, just saying this earlier, Jiva Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Baladev, or Sridhar Swami, and he said, for the purpose of this purport, we'll take the explanation of Jiva Goswami. That means it's not necessarily that it's only like that. And the Vedic literatures are like that. We spoke about it a few days ago. Hermeneutics, learning how to see, that there's more than one understanding and want more than one application. It depends on so many variations. But, the basic things are there. The principles are still the same. All the other things are actually details. The principles are, what's the principles in our movement? Chant Hare Krishna. 16 rounds, 32 rounds, 92 rounds. That's a detail. It's a big detail, actually, but it's still a detail. Prabhupada changed the details, so we could actually follow. But the principle is to chant Hare Krishna. Any other principles? Accept a spiritual master. Who said that? I didn't see anybody's lips moving. Oh, was it? Yeah, that's a principle. It depends who you're following. Some people don't see that. They see it in a slightly different way. Mahajana yena gata sapanta. We cannot understand the Shastras without hearing from advanced souls. That's the principle. And that's actually a spiritual master. When we accept somebody's advice, they're actually a spiritual master. Anything else? Did you have something? You put your hand up.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj. I'm wondering, in light of this Bhagavad Gita verse, then could you maybe talk about the importance of the individual using discrimination when associating with devotees?
Discrimination with devotees. I didn't get the first bit.
In light of this Bhagavad Gita verse that we've been reading, that we still consider somebody a sadhu after fall down, then how does that affect us in terms of associating with that devotee, or does it affect us with associating with that devotee?
If they're in good standing, no. We can learn from it. If somebody, falls away from the process, then we have to, be a little bit careful that they may be actually not following properly. So if we associate too closely, we'll also become influenced. So we have to have that discrimination. But we don't criticize them, that's all. Because, it can happen to us. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. If Krishna lifts his veil of protection, then, material energy will completely, control us. It's only because Krishna is protecting us, because we're following, that we're actually able to withstand the effects of the material energy. And, other sampradaya, especially in our sampradaya, under the protection of Lord Chaitanya, he's giving us real protection. The other sampradayas, they can't understand how we can go out on the street, a Western street, and not be affected by our surroundings. It's generally, it's not that, sadhus do that. Those who are following a process of spiritual life, they don't generally do that. They usually keep a distance. And it's just purely Lord Chaitanya's special protection. So we don't want to lose that protection. That's the point. We want to, keep in that, keeping that protection. Because all devotees are dear to Krishna. Every living entity in creation is dear to Krishna. What to speak of, devotees? Okay, we can stop there. Yantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Gaura Premanandi.
Haribol. His Holiness the